Hi, fierce souls, and welcome to another Sunday session. I am joined today by the lovely Sarah Marks, who will introduce herself in the moment. For anyone that doesn't know me, I am Jordan, aka the Soul Diva, and my mission is for women to love themselves fiercely, live soulfully, reclaim their worth and self-expression, and heal after abuse and toxic relationships. Sarah, introduce
Hello.
yourself.
I will do indeed. So I am Sarah Marks. I run Sarah Marks Coaching. I'm a mindset coach, and I specialise in helping women that are stuck. They've kind of got to a part of their life where they want to make a change, either start a new business or they want to start a new career, or just change jobs. And I just help them to kind of gain the clarity of what it is they want their life to look like, inspire the confidence, and support them to take action to make those changes a reality and start living the life that they dream of.
I think that's so great, because I think as women in particular, we can get to points in our lives and end up almost on that treadmill of expectations.
Absolutely. And I think as women, we doubt ourselves all the time. I think, from a very young age, those seeds of doubt are planted. And as I mentioned, I see it in my daughters, even now, and it's just important that we recognize actually, how powerful and how strong we are, and recognize all our abilities and making the most of them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, thinking of some of the women that I have the privilege to work with, is, these are women that from the outside look like they have everything, and you can, look at these women, and I'm actually going to pick on one of my friends as an example, but she knows that I use her as an example, so it's fine. She's got a professional job, divorced, but active social life. You would look at it from the outside, it looks like everything. But when she recently started dating, for the first time, I suddenly heard all the doubts that were coming out. And it was like, there are these question marks about worth, and the question marks about ability, and it's being able to move through that.
Absolutely. And I think that's the one thing with my clients, I would love to see them, is to see them how I see them, because actually, I see how strong and how powerful. And I mean, a lot of the work I do is story work. So we look at the past life of people and see what happened, what pivots and what traumas they've had in their life, and how it's actually shaped the person that they've become now. And actually, even just by doing that story work and having your story read back to you, you can see people realizing, like, oh God, actually, I have been through an awful lot, and I've come out the other side, and I've got all these strengths because of it. So just to be able to, for those women to see themselves through somebody else's eyes can be so enlightening, because then they realize actually how incredibly awesome they actually are.
Well, I was going to say, wasn't going to share this, but we'll share it. Just let that slip. I actually had the privilege of you taking me through story work.
You did indeed. Absolutely.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I've been very open about the fact that I'm one of those people that's, done therapy and counselling and coaching and energy work. And I have to say that process of story work was so powerful, and took me to a level that I've never been taken to, and brought up things that, certainly patterns I'd never put together before. But as you said, more than that, actually going through it with somebody, having it read back, having someone else, literally having someone else see you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, and you were great because you were so truthful in your story, and you did, you shared so much. And it's absolutely having somebody kind of validating you, and actually, reading it back, and it paints it in a completely different picture. Let's say, there were patterns that I remember actually, you kind of like, you recognize patterns as we were going, you were like, there we go, that's it, that's where it is. And I think just having that process of having somebody tell you what your life story has been, it's very, very powerful.
And I was just thinking, because obviously I don't do the full story work, but using timelines with my clients to as one of those intro sessions to kind of just look at what has happened, and again, just being able to, exactly what you were saying, wishing the clients could see themselves through my eyes, because looking at some of those timelines and just being able to go, well, it makes sense that you're feeling this way, or it makes sense that you're struggling with this situation. Let's put a bit of self-compassion in there, let's have a little bit of kindness in there, let's work on the self-love that's in there to be able to move forward, because actually these foundations need to be put in place.
No, absolutely. And I think it's important as well that I think people, particularly with story work, they always think there has to have been something dramatic in their past. There has to be a significant trauma for it to have shaped them. And it doesn't. It can be the smallest thing, but just how you react to that in the moment can have incredible effects throughout the rest of your life. And that's why I kind of, I like the depth that we go into in story work, because actually, you will pick up on things that it might just be a sentence that somebody puts in about, something, how they felt at school, something somebody said to them at school. It might have just crept in, and they probably haven't even thought about it in the past. And then you're like, well, actually, what does that mean to you? Has that actually shaped how you feel about yourself? And because they've obviously chosen to include it in the story, there probably is a much deeper meaning behind it. And that I just think so powerful. I know, because obviously I went through story work myself. And like you, I just didn't recognize the patterns. I didn't understand. I felt something was holding me back, but I didn't really understand exactly what it was. And it was actually, something that, kind of happened when I was at secondary school, and just that kind of feeling of never quite being enough, always being sort of, pretty average, middle of the road, not excelling in anything, just being good at most things, which sounds a real positive. But when you're, a teenager and you want to stand out and you want to be exceptionally good at a particular subject or a particular sport, and actually you're just, you're doing well on that, it's not enough. And that I really took that into my identity, and I was like, well, I'm just average. But actually, nobody is average. And that was certainly kind of one of the main things I got from my storyline, was to actually look at different aspects of my life and go, well, actually, no, I'm not winning Olympic medals in a certain sport, but actually I do have strengths. I do. And it's like you say, it's kind of celebrating those and having compassion for yourself, that you are absolutely doing the best that you can, and you are, even just by existing, you are completely enough.
I was hearing you say that, I was just thinking, like, actually not good enough, or you are enough rather, should almost be a lesson in school, because we think about, our core beliefs are in place by the time we're 16. Most of those experiences are before we're 8, or at least that started that journey to solidifying those beliefs. And absolutely, it can be as simple as something that's been said to you at school, something that's been said in as a throwaway comment, that day the teacher says, could try harder, and you're just in the place where that lands and stays.
And absolutely. And as soon as you said that, I have a memory of I wanted to be a solicitor when I was at school, basically because I loved LA law, and I was just like, right, that's it, I'm going to be a lawyer. And this history teacher, I've not done very well in the test. Like the actual results, I've got no memory of at all. But I just remember him throwing my book in front of me, saying, "And she wants to be a solicitor." And the shame and like, even now I feel it. I actually feel it in my body. Just thinking, oh God, yeah, what am I thinking? How can I possibly be? But it was interesting because I still wanted to be. It wasn't until I kind of hit A levels I thought, actually, yeah, no, it's not going to work out for me. But it's literally, as soon as you mentioned that memory is so vivid. So it obviously had a real, and he probably would have absolutely no idea of the impact of what he said on me that day. But it's, I don't even want to work out how many years ago that was. It's a significant number of years ago, and to still kind of invoke that kind of physical response. That who are you to think you could achieve something that you want to? That's powerful, and that's why it's so important how we talk to kids. It's
absolutely. I'm going to come back to that actually in a bit, but just thinking about your you were saying obviously about the transitions and working with women. It's like, actually, if that's the memory that is stuck in your belief system, so both the mind and the fact that you can still feel it,
yeah,
then when you're coming up to make those changes, as we both know from doing that work, we might not even know what it is that's holding us back.
Oh, absolutely.
You might not know it was that one throwaway thing, but all you know is that somewhere there's this, whether it's not enough or absolutely, sometimes it's the clarity, but we're still back to like, actually, who am I? Who do I want to become? Where do I want to go?
Yeah.
And trying to pull all of that together while you're not aware that you have these blocks, for want of a better word, in your system.
Absolutely. And I think you're so right, and I think it's difficult to look at the future and think, right, this is what I want to become, if you don't really look at the past and think, okay, this is how I've got here. It's so important. And I certainly wouldn't have been able to go on the journey that I've been on without doing that story work, because actually it unlocked an awful lot for me. And just kind of acceptance on, who I am, and actually, I like who I am. But it's kind of looking at that process that you've been through in order to see actually how far you can go in the future. It's so important.
And yeah, I think you said acceptance, and that's definitely the starting point for anything. But it sounds so easy to say it. It's like, oh God, you just need to accept yourself. That's it. You just need to accept yourself. And
actually, and even saying that I like myself, there are still, I'm much better than I was, but there will still be days when I get frustrated with myself and I don't feel enough. And actually, that I feel enough, it's one that's, it's everywhere now, isn't it? You can get iPhone cases and all sorts of I am enough. And it took me a very long time to actually say those words and genuinely feel it. That was, and again, and it's still something that I have to work on, but it can sound so simple to say I am enough, but to actually get that feeling behind it and believe it, it's a process.
Yeah, and to be able to say it out loud, and I'm thinking of Mel Robbins with a high five challenge and Louise Hay with a mirror work. To be able to do that and sit in front of the mirror or stand in front of the mirror and say those words to yourself with the feeling, developing the belief, because that's not a overnight moment, and actually how hard it is to get those, I was going to say big words, but actually the words themselves aren't that big. I am enough, but it's the big feeling that comes up.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it takes practice. It's I remember first learning about affirmations and doing them, and I felt silly. I would look in the mirror and go, I am enough. I am enough. And then I can't even remember what it was, but there was just one day where I just looked myself in the eyes and was like, I am enough. And the feeling came, and I was like, oh, this is what people are talking about. This, and actually the sense of peace it brings you is just like, wow, It's really powerful. And it's just something that I'm 44. I just wish I'd had that kind of peace a lot earlier in my life. That's my own, and it's not a regret, because actually, I wouldn't be who I was today if I hadn't been through what I've been through. But it would be interesting to know where I would be had I had these skills and I had this belief much earlier on in my life.
No, absolutely. And it was, a couple of thoughts came to mind actually as you were saying that, and I was thinking, when we talk about affirmations, so often it's like, oh, affirmations are the way, but we have to be able to feel safe to let that belief into our body. So we have to do the work alongside the affirmations to let that in, and to get to the point where, like you said, that one day it just clicked, something had shifted, something had changed, and to be able to stand there. And I was thinking of, for me, it's, I love myself, and it took years. And like you, of course, there's days where I stand there and the beating myself up comes to mind, or as I say, I have a day, that day where I feel fat, or I don't feel as good, and but now I'm much better at the compassion, the kindness, the recognizing it, the letting it go, and bringing in
it's the letting it go, isn't it? That's right, it's the letting it go. It's accepting it, that actually, today I don't feel great, and it's not wallowing in it and letting it turn into a few weeks where you feel that, or just letting it take control, and letting it hold you back, because it's too easy to sit in those feelings of not feeling good enough.
Absolutely.
And that is what will stop. It's like, when I speak to my clients, a huge part of what I do is instilling that confidence to take that action, because actually, that they know what they want to do, or they know what they have to do, but actually having the confidence to do it, it is a kind of a completely different matter. So it's really, once they have got that confidence and that inner belief that they can achieve what they want to achieve, that's when they move forward. That's when they make progress.
And I think sometimes as well, that forward movement and the taking those steps, it's not always the fear of doing it, or quite often it's the worthiness of receiving what is on the other side.
Absolutely. And actually the fear of success was something that I didn't realize was something that used to hold me back. I could understand, because I could understand the fear of failing, because nobody wants to fail, and I completely got that. And it was the coach I was working with, she said it was foreboding joy. It was like, you were scared of the success, and that sounds so crazy, but then when you actually break it down, particularly sort of in my story, I have kind of experienced loss, and so I guess creating a very successful business, well, then you've got something to lose, and actually it suddenly then makes sense why you'd be holding yourself back, because if you haven't got this business, then you haven't got anything to lose, and you haven't got to go through that pain. But then it's kind of recognizing that and going, but think about the joy, and actually just because something happened in your past doesn't mean you're going to lose this. It doesn't mean because it's that kind of learning, and say just pushing yourself forward.
Yeah. And I was thinking, as you were saying about losing, actually also, if you've never had it before, how do you know what that feeling's going to be? And how do you know how you're going to respond? So there's almost that fear of the unknown. So it's if the narrative you're telling yourself is, I always fail, the fact that therefore this is going to be a completely new thing and unknown, and what's that going to mean? I have no idea. So if I keep failing, I know how that feels. That's comfort.
It's comfort. Absolutely.
Way.
Completely. No, it is, because we do, pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone is not something as humans we like to do. It's because you feel safe. So even if safe actually is sitting there with nothing and, you know, like say sitting in failure is comfortable. It's what we're used to. But it's, you know, and it's recognizing, I guess, you know, that you don't have to do that. You know, you don't have to sit there. You know, it is kind of accepting that, you know, you are going to be fearful. There's never going to be necessarily a time where you're going to go, yes, right, that's it, I've got all the confidence in the world, I'm going to go out and do it. There's always going to be some part of you, because that fear has kept you safe. And so it's kind of, you know, just accepting that that is part of it, but just kind of, you know, moving past it.
I was thinking of actually not just the coaches that I kind of follow on social media, but other celebs or mentors, for want of better words. And actually, I really love those that are honest about their journeys, and it's not just here's the gloss and here's all the positive. Actually, this is what the journey looks like. This is what it's like where I'm doubting myself and I'm having one of those off days or an off week. Or when they talk about failing, actually they also add their feelings.
Yes.
I think I remember reading, funnily enough, Duncan Ballantyne, and you know, he talks about failing and he talks about, you know, some of his businesses going down. But what I can't remember him talking about is actually how that made him feel.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
It's not that he didn't write it, it just doesn't stand out for me. I remember the stories of the failing, but not how it's the feeling. Whereas, funnily enough, the other person that's just come to mind is Mel Robbins, and she had
I was thinking of Mel Robbins,
her TV show, and that obviously got taken off, and she was very open. You know, she was there really saying open, how disappointed she was and how it was making her feel, and the time that she needed to take before she could step forward again. And I really,
so do you think that's a male, do you think that's a male female thing? Do you think that's, you know, just as women we're more in touch with the feelings and that?
I think that's changing now, but I guess when you're talking about also maybe older school entrepreneurs, I guess the ones that are out there, and certainly the ones that are coming into my mind straight away, are all male, and they all happen to be white male as well. You know, I've got like Alan Sugar, Duncan Ballantyne.
We're so on the same wavelength. They're exactly who I was picturing as well.
Yeah, and you know, when you lose your words, Virgin, Richard
Branson.
Thank you. His surname was not coming into my head. So I guess we are talking a type of person, and also maybe at that point being open on feelings, you know, wasn't what you do. I think that is changing, and I think there are now male entrepreneurs out there who may be more honest and open about their feelings. But no, I think there's definitely a feminine side. That's definitely a feminine energy of that openness and honesty.
I think you're right. I think because it would have probably been seen as a weakness to talk about how failure would have made him feel. That sort of that vulnerability would necessarily come easy to, I guess, probably a man of that age.
Yeah, and I was just thinking of the time, and it's become much more acceptable. You know, we're now in a time where talking about mental health, certainly with men talking about mental health, vulnerability, sexuality, all those, I guess, all those elements now where we're much more inclusive.
Yeah.
But going back to maybe, 10, 20 years ago, even, where that wasn't as accepted. And I love the random things that come to my mind when I have these conversations. I was thinking of somebody like Oprah, where going on her show and being open was this new thing.
It was huge, wasn't it? Yeah.
So I think now we are in that different time. And you were saying earlier about if you'd known this when you were younger, but actually, we're both similar age, and it's of that time. We didn't have all of this open conversation about mental health, or
Absolutely.
self-worth, or it wasn't there. It wasn't seen as something that was needed, I guess, at the time.
No, and I love the fact that, I really do, because I think that's such a force for good. Because, you know, my daughter the other day, she said something all about self-care, and I was like, yes, that is self-care. And I just love the fact that she's got that concept that actually, you know, she needs to take care of herself, and it's not selfish to take care of herself. Because I think that's certainly something that I think I probably felt, you know, because, you know, my mum was a stay-at-home mum for a long time, and she absolutely put us above everything. Like, she was, you know, absolutely first and foremost, she was a mum, and when I became a mum, I definitely kind of felt that was what I needed to do. That was but, you know, as soon as you actually understand that you can't do everything unless you're taking care of yourself, and that is such it feels like such an alien concept, because you just feel like kids should come first, and you don't. But actually, you know, and it's not just, you know, a relationship with your kids, it's a relationship with anybody. You know, you cannot maintain it if you're not taking care of yourself. So, you know, it does, and I just love the fact that she's got that, you know, just there's the mention of self-care and understanding kind of that actually it's important. Just brilliant. And that is because it's talked about so widely.
Yeah. And I was thinking, you know, we've got apps available that talk about it, support it. There are these conversations going on, and there are conversations going on from, you know, very strong male figures as well as female figures. So we're back to actually now it's opening up those conversations of feelings and opening up struggles that they've had as well. Because I think that's the other bit, is when I was at school and thinking teenage years, and like you, I'm probably not going to admit exactly how long ago.
I can't work it out, to be honest.
Too many years, too many. But we just didn't have those role models speaking out.
No.
And therefore, you know, I certainly know when I was struggling with myself and who I was and kind of how I fitted in, not just with friends, but kind of that bigger picture of, you know, well, I have these values and I have these thoughts and I have these things I want to do, but how does that fit? But alongside doubting myself and, you know, not feeling as worthy, there wasn't anybody out there saying anything. You know, we didn't have Twitter and Instagram, and now, you know, we do have this whole host of people, including celebs, including people who are saying, well, actually, this has been my journey.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, Fern Cotton is one that really sticks in my mind because, you know, obviously, you know, she's younger than me, but I remember she was one of those people that just looked like she was always having fun, wasn't she? You know, so confident, so doing all this live TV, and she just looked like she was, you know, and she was struggling, you know, and she's been so open about her struggles, and it's inspiring. It really is inspiring because, you know, I think we all do. I think there's not anybody that doesn't go through a period of doubting themselves. But, you know, to admit that that's exactly what you're going through, you know, it makes you vulnerable, but it's I guess it's, you know, part of the process to actually moving past it.
When I was thinking about, you know, anxiety and imposter syndrome, and certainly when I first started work, and, you know, that there was this real sense of imposter syndrome. You know, I'm a kid and I'm in this grown-up world, and how does it all fit together? And I'm, you know, anxious about going to things, and I say that as a kid, but actually even as I was older, you know, having to go to certain meetings for the first time in a job that I could do and I was fully competent in, still having this imposter syndrome, still having not a clinical level of anxiety or anything that needed support, that natural level of anxiety and worry of, well, you know, there's going to be all these people in the room, and why am I here, and do I deserve to be here, and do I have anything to contribute, and all of this natural level that just follows you through. And again, it's, I guess for me, it's not just the struggling with someone like Fern Cotton speaking out, but again, actually it's these people that are performing and on television and film and theatre, and who talk about anxiety and stage fright and all those bits that you would never put into the way that we see them.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's staggering. You know, like somebody like Adele can feel sick with stage fright before she steps. I mean, that's just incredible. And you think, yeah, there's no wonder, you know, we just naturally doubt ourselves. But it's interesting you said that you felt imposter syndrome sort of, you know, as soon as you kind of entered the workplace, because I feel like mine didn't really kick in for sort of a good few years. I think when I started, I felt kind of covered by almost feeling like the child in the situation, and that I was eager to learn, and it was acceptable. It was when I got that little bit older, and then people started coming in, and I had people working underneath me, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, hang on a minute, you know, I'm meant to be at this particular level, and am I at this level, and can I speak to these people at this, you know, can I demand something of these people? And that's where it really kicked in for me. And I remember, you know, sitting in meeting rooms and having ideas and thinking, we're doing that wrong with it, and just not having the confidence to, because I didn't have value, or I didn't value, you know, my experience, and that actually, you know, and I quite often find what I do is I then speak to, you know, my manager afterwards, and they'd be like, oh yeah, that's a great idea. And even that wasn't enough for me to go, okay, next time, you know, maybe, you know, I kind of speak up. It's a real, it was a real change in attitude. Once I started getting that little bit more responsibility, I liked the first sort of, you know, 2 or 3 years of working, because maybe I thought I could get away with it. I was like, well, I'm just still learning, I'm still new. And then as soon as you sort of like pass that new stage, you're like, oh, actually, yeah.
I guess it also depends what the role is, because I was thinking actually my first post university, you know, I'd done the bar work and all of that stuff, but my first post university role was marketing assistant, actually in a London nightclub. So I was booking some big name DJs and performers. So there was a lot of imposter syndrome, because we're back to actually I was booking my idols, and I'm like, okay, these people are here, and if I get any of this wrong, so yeah, maybe it was more about that than and you're right, it kicks in different ways, actually thinking about then further on, where I didn't have that so much in certain job roles, but then it came back in others. So yeah, I think it does depend.
Well, I think my biggest imposter syndrome was because I was a stay-at-home mum for 5 years, and then the thought of going back into PR and marketing, going back into an office and picking up where I'd left off, terrified me. I didn't think I had it in me. I felt like I'd forgotten everything I'd ever done. And that happens so often to women, I think. And it doesn't have to be, 5 years was quite a significant amount of time, but, you know, even 6-9 months, it can really affect your confidence in going back. And I think that's why so many women kind of look for that kind of career change after they've been a stay-at-home mum, partly because maybe they want, you know, their priorities have changed and they want you know, a different work-life balance. But I think a lot of times it comes down to they don't feel that they can pick up where they left off.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you've said it, it's things shift. I think things absolutely, there's a natural shift. But stepping out of anything and going back, you know, even for me, when we'd had after lockdown, and I'd gone back to my old role rather than one I'd been in during lockdown, And there was this sense of, can I remember how to do it? Can I remember and I'm like, hang on, this is a job I did for 18 months. No problem, not an issue. But just even being out for that short period with the changes that had occurred with lockdown.
Yeah.
There was this, I hope everyone's going to be kind and gentle with me. It's like, this is, you know, and I was about to say this is silly, but actually this is what as women we do all the time, and this is how we downplay it all the time.
Absolutely.
Because we talk about it as, well, it's so silly. No, it's real. And this is where we need to be kind with ourselves, compassionate with ourselves, and also open, so that women know that they're not the only ones having this thought and going through this. There are other women out there doing it, and they can be supported in it.
Absolutely. Because actually, you know, once you do get going again, it's incredible how quickly it all comes back to you. It really is. And it, you know, it's kind of like riding a bike, but it is, you know, all these things kick in. And actually, you've got a wealth of experience. You know, just because you've been out for a couple of years, that experience hasn't gone anywhere. It's still there. So actually, you know, when you are in a meeting and you know you're being asked your thoughts on something, there will be something there. And I think that was my fear. I thought, that's it, I've just forgotten everything. I don't know. I know nothing. But you know, as soon as I started having conversations with people, and things would come out and be like, oh, I remember when I did this and this worked, and you're like, it's all there. And I think that was what we don't do as women, is we don't value our experience.
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, in the workplace, we still have this I can't think of exactly what the word that I'm after is, but imbalance, I guess, where, because it's the woman that generally takes time out after having children, that there is something seen as, oh, that, well, they're not going to be in the same place when they come back, that there's almost this societal view as well, rather than it's the guy that's been out for, you know, 9 months. And
absolutely. And I do think it's changing. I do think, you know, women are kind of going back into the workplace, and they are managing that kind of transition a lot better than they used to. But I think you're right, there's still that kind of expectation that maybe because actually when I went back, my first daughter, I had best part of a year off maternity leave, and I went back on a 4-day week contract, whereas I've previously been working 5. Anybody who's done that, you know, you basically are working 5 days just in a very short amount of time, and getting paid obviously, you know, 20% less. But it is that expectation that, you know, you're not necessarily going to come back and be the person that you were beforehand.
And I also think there's so much more as well. And you know, Susan Hyatt, who you know that she's somebody I've worked with, a coach that I work with, but she talks about the invisible workload of women. And I think as well as going back, it's also then, you know, coming home, the family being there, and quite often having sort of all those additional roles that nobody talks about, and then how you balance all that. I think, you know, the bit we haven't been able to, I was going to say we haven't been able to hide, but I guess wasn't probably talked about again as much, but is now out in the open, is actually how patriarchal our Western society is, where these expectations sit. So there's a lot of pressure on women, whether you have children or not. There's
absolutely
still this pressure.
Oh, completely. It doesn't, just because you have children, that's just another thing in the mix. But it's whether you've got them or not. I think it's still very similar issues.
I was actually, I did a video this week, and I was talking about when I'd worked in security, and obviously it was very masculine environment, masculine energy, and it brought back memories of every time I moved teams, every time I went somewhere, I had to start again, I had to prove myself. So everything you were saying about the experience, it wasn't something that I could kind of carry through. It wasn't I could turn up with, you know, even my recommendations, because in that particular environment, it's like, no, we need to see you can do it.
Yeah.
So every new space was this, oh, I've got to push again, I've got to try again, I've got to prove myself again. And I just remember, although I loved the job, it was like, at what point can I just turn up and somebody go, we're going to accept you exactly as we would one of the guys?
Yeah.
And
that's exhausting, isn't it, having to put yourself through that level of pressure to prove yourself time and time again.
But again, I was just thinking, for, you know, for women, I guess even that going back, there is that level of proof, horrible word, not just to themselves, but actually to others, because you're now back, but you've had a change in your family, whatever that is.
No, absolutely. And it's I think it's changing, but it's probably changing slower than it should be. It's a process.
And I think you were saying something earlier as well, which I was going to come back to, and you were talking about obviously teenagers now and what they have. And my thinking was going, actually, it's even harder as if you're a parent, you know, who's got teenagers that are going through this while you're trying to go through your own stuff.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I mean, and that's what because you know, we've discussed my daughter suffers with anxiety, and actually going through, being coached myself and going through the process and then qualifying myself as a coach has really helped me support her in that, because I'm a lot more mindful about the language I use around her. And, you know, I can see where she's saying things about herself and I'm thinking, no, that, you know, that could become a limiting belief. I'm trying to kind of pick up on it straight away and like, no, that you don't mean that. You're, you know, that's not a belief you want to have about yourself. You are brilliant at this, or, you know. So actually, yeah, we are. I guess we're going through it together. And as much as I would have loved to have already kind of been there and doing it, actually, I think it's kind of helping. You know, the fact that, you know, she is talking about self-care. Yes, she might have seen about it on a TikTok, but actually, it's something that I'm talking to her about as well. And talking about, you know, visioning, and I love the fact that she's really into vision boards, and you know, and I absolutely love it, because that was an absolutely alien concept to me. And so actually, I just feel like it's been everything that I'm learning now, I'm able to pass on to her, and really kind of support, particularly, you know, with her anxiety, because it does bring up so much self-doubt, and it can have a real crippling effect where she just can't do the things that she loves to do. So actually being able to kind of coach her through that process has been immense. You know, it really has helped. And I don't think it's just helped her. I think I have helped her to kind of make progress, but it's helped me deal with it, you know, because, you know, as we were saying, as a mum, you just want to fix it. You want to make all her anxieties go away and, you know, let her live, because, you know, particularly when anxiety hits as a teenager, you know, you all of a sudden they're this bubbly, confident little girl. Anxiety hits and you don't recognize that child, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. But actually accepting that there is no magic wand, you know, you just have to manage the process as best you can and support them as best you can. That's really hard for a mum, because it doesn't, you know, you just want to fix.
Yeah, absolutely. And working with anxiety is working with the uncertainty.
Absolutely. And again, that just kind of goes against the grain, because you want to offer them. And I think particularly the last couple of years, you know, going through the pandemic and, you know, hearing about the war in Ukraine, you know, I remember sitting with my daughter, and she was talking about this virus in China, and saying that her friends, she was really getting quite frightened about it, because her friends at school had been talking about it. And I was like, no, it's miles away. We've got protocols in place. You don't have to worry about it. And I tell you what, I will never say never again, because it was only like a few weeks later and boom, you know, we're in lockdown. And that was a real learning moment for me, actually, because like you say, you cannot offer certainty to anybody, really. As much as you want to do that as a parent, you want to say, no, this is never going to happen, just don't worry about it, just focus on all the positives in life. Actually, if the last few years have taught us anything, anything is possible. But it's how you react to those situations and how you manage it, that's the most important thing.
It brought to mind the fact that actually when I've worked with parents, quite often what's brought them to come and get the support and work on their own issues is they don't want to pass that down, or they're starting to see their kids go through something similar, and now it's like, no, I want to break this cycle, I need to address it so I can then support them as well.
Absolutely, because you want to be a role model for your kids, don't you? You absolutely do. And I think, being a role model is about working on yourself and being the best version of yourself that you can be. And it kind of goes back to, going against the grain and actually putting yourself first and taking care of yourself and making sure, you're achieving what you want to achieve, because actually that sets the best example, so that particularly when you're raising daughters, they know that it's absolutely imperative that they put their own needs first.
Yeah. And for me, that is the message, that we need to get down the ages, actually. It's okay to put yourself first, as you were saying earlier. It's not selfish, but also to start this work earlier, because rather than going back and breaking cycles and undoing everything we've been carrying around for however long it is, that being able to do that work at the time while everything is there and live. And for me, I think one of the things that I always remember from when I was doing my work in CAMS was looking and going, actually, so much of this work is systemic. So much of this work should be involving the family, that this isn't a fix my child moment. This is how can we work on all the layers? So, if we're scaffolding parents, they've then got the knowledge, the support, and the ability to support their child, as well as being, having that additional support in place. And I was going to say, what I think is hard in that sometimes, though, is for parents who might not be ready to look at themselves.
Absolutely.
Seeing it in their child, but if they're not ready to look at themselves and not ready to unpack that, being able to do that work is
absolutely. And that's, we were talking before, weren't we, about, some people, they might like the idea of being coached, but they're just simply not ready to open up and to actually do the work, to be vulnerable and to challenge your beliefs, because it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to actually look at yourself, and look at things that you need to not necessarily fix, but just things that you need to address, and maybe thoughts that you need to reframe. It can be very emotional, but I have to say, having gone through an awful lot of it myself, it is so rewarding. Just that the peace you get when you have that kind of acceptance, there's just nothing quite like it, really.
No, and I was thinking, when you were talking about the vulnerability, I spent so many years trying to hide mine. So many years that vulnerability was this weakness. You're not vulnerable, you don't show it. And I always remember, interestingly, my toxic ex that I refer to, he'd met me, I was working the doors, obviously that's how I came across. And I remember he came back one night and I wasn't feeling very well, and I was literally curled up against the radiator crying, and he didn't know how to respond to me. But of course, then that reinforces the vulnerability isn't a good place either. And it's taken me a lot of time to go, no, actually, being open isn't vulnerable. You know, it is vulnerable, but there's a strength in it.
Exactly. It's not weakness, is it? It's not weak. Yeah.
No, and we've just talked about, you know, people like Fern Cotton, Mel Robbins, how inspiring it is to hear their honesty and their openness, but they've had to be vulnerable to share that. But actually, they're sharing their story. We know it's been healing for them. They've said that, and therefore it's also inspiring and healing for us. So again, to keep that going and moving forward. And I think as well, to, you know, it's okay to have those feelings. It's okay to
absolutely
be upset or to, you know, feel angry. I know I've said this before on one of these videos, but again, I think as women, we get told to repress our anger, or it's anger's bad. And it's like, actually, the feeling itself isn't good or bad. It's a neutral feeling.
It's a feeling.
It's how we express it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, I know I used to, if I was crying for whatever reason, I used to try and hide it from the girls. I used to think, you know, oh no, mum's fine, I've got hay fever, I've got something in my eye. Whereas now, you know, if I'm having a day, where there was sort of an anniversary of losing one of my parents, came up, and I was really upset, and I told myself, you know what, I missed my dad, you know, and actually I think that's good, because, or if I, you know, even if I'm just having a bad day and I'm like, I don't know why I'm crying, but I just need to cry, because I think, you know, it's just kind of ingrained in you that it's not good to cry. It's not certainly, you know, but actually it's a real physical release. And sometimes we absolutely just need to do it, and it can make you feel so much better. And I don't want it to be something that my girls feel they've got to hide from, particularly from themselves. I don't, you know, if they're feeling that way, I want them to accept that that's how they're feeling.
I remember reading something yesterday, actually. It was about this whole debate about crying at work, and particularly in something like, you know, social care or working in mental health, where we're supporting others to be vulnerable and express their feelings and identify their feelings, but actually having your own is, again, quite often criticized. I'm not talking about in front of your clients, but actually if you've had a really bad day and you've gone back to the office and that's how you're feeling, actually, what do you do with that? And again, what came to mind was when I worked the doors, when the guys got angry, quite often they'd go and punch something. They could do that as discreetly as possible, and they could kind of mask their anger a little bit. Unfortunately for me, my anger always came out as tears.
Yes. Yeah.
It was a lot harder to mask. And of course we're back to, I'm the woman on the team who's now crying, and that's
absolutely, and it's the same feeling, it's just how you choose to express it, and it's no weaker to, you know, break down, have a cry for moments than it is to punch a wall. You know, it's just a physical manifestation of an actual feeling. That's all it is. But yet we associate tears with weakness.
Absolutely. And yes, so, you know, it's back to that. We are back to those sort of, you know, those masculine, feminine, what is seen as masculine and feminine traits, and also the energies, you know, that actually, I think if we're becoming more accepting of those more feminine energies and expressing your feelings is there, doesn't matter whether you're male, female, non-binary, other, however you describe yourself, that we need to be more comfortable with this, that it's okay, you know, we want people to be joyful and happy, and I think we actually suppress that just as much as we suppress tears, because certainly in England certainly in England, I think maybe, you know, maybe a lot of my American friends might be different, but yeah, we're not very good at celebrating ourselves. So while we suppress the tears, the anger, those emotions that are seen as negative or more negative, actually we're not we're just as bad at doing the other side as well.
Absolutely. And that's actually one thing that crops up with nearly every client I've ever worked with, is that something amazing happens to them and they just, oh yeah, that sounds like what you did to celebrate it. Oh, I don't know. And it's so important that we, like you say, that you recognize those achievements and you celebrate the good times.
Absolutely.
It's so important.
That feels like a little bit of a note to talk about celebrating the good times and ending. Is there anything else you would like to add before we finish?
No, I think we've been on quite a we've gone on quite a journey on this conversation.
I love the conversations that just go on journeys. They're great.
Oh no, it was lovely. No, I really enjoyed chatting. Fantastic.
Sarah, if anyone wants to get in touch with you after this, how can they do that?
Yep, my Instagram handle is Sarah Marks Coaching. That's probably the best one. And my Facebook is again Sarah Marks Coaching. So you can find me on both of those. Nice.
Brilliant. And we will have those on under the post as well.
Fantastic.
Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you.
We will speak to you all soon.